Well, it's been 8 years. It's all been building to this, the final episode of Game of Thrones. I'm going to go through my immediate reactions to the episode now. I literally saw it about 15 minutes ago, so after this, I might let it marinate a little bit and come back and do a longer, more in-depth video. And I might miss a couple things, but let's jump right into it. And of course, this was the last episode of Game of Thrones, so there will be spoilers. So if you haven't seen it, get out of here, watch the episode, and then come back later. So going into this episode, the first thing I decided mentally is that I'm going to ignore all the context of this episode. I'm not going to let it bother me. I've accepted that a couple seasons ago they hit the fast forward button, and then a couple episodes ago they hit it again. So I have to just go into this episode accepting Daenerys is evil now. You know, they planted some seeds for that early on. The transition was pretty clunky, but I just have to accept going into this. She's evil. She's turned into basically Hitler, maybe worse than Hitler based on some of what we saw in this episode. And accepting that, I would probably give this episode something like a C. It wasn't very good. And if you were to break it up into two parts, because there was sort of a first third of the episode before the time jump versus the second, 2/3 of the episode post time jump. That first part I actually thought was pretty good. And once they jumped, we'll get into kind of what went wrong there. But if we start with just that first part, I really liked the tension. The whole time watching Jon struggle, what is Jon going to do? I mean, it's been so frustrating to watch him basically have 2 or 3 lines in the last couple of episodes that all amount to different versions of, she's my queen. She's my queen. And you want to just shake him and tell him to say something and do something and have an original thought. So there's all this tension building up to what's going to happen when Jon actually sees the queen. And when he did, and when he killed her, I thought that was a great moment. That moment on its own was excellent. All the tension building up to it was great. Then a few things went wrong. After Jon killed the queen, there was all that tension of what's the dragon going to do now? Is he going to kill Jon? For a second, it looked like he might. And then the dragon, for some reason, decides to melt the Iron Throne. And for a second, I was with it. I was like, yeah, melt the damn thing. And then I stopped and I thought, does he have any understanding of what's happening here? Is he mad at the throne because he understands that led Daenerys to make all the choices that she made? That's just a level of awareness that I don't think has been at all established for the dragons. So that was one of the first big flaws in this episode that really screamed in my face that they're going for. That's where the writing and the plot was escaping what actually made sense from all the events that led up to this. Some of the issues we've been seeing this season overall. Besides that, I understand that Jon has to act as though he's still loyal to the queen. He can't just outright say, she burned a bunch of women and children, I don't like her anymore, because then he's treasonous and then he gets executed. But I got the feeling this episode that he was truly morally torn. He said things like, I don't know what I would have done in that position. It's a tough call. She's the queen. She did what she had to. I find it very hard to believe that a character like Jon would have any moral question over whether or not it's okay to kill a bunch of children, women, and men, by the way. I mean, killing them wasn't cool either. But killing a whole city, I don't think Jon would have even entertained that as an okay thing to do for a second. But overall, I thought that first third, I enjoyed it. I kept turning to my brother and saying, this is all right. This isn't too bad. If the rest of the episode is like this, I can accept that. This is not a terrible episode to end the series on. Then after the time jump, something really bizarre happened, which is that the episode sort of turned into an episode of The Office, where it was just one really awkward scene after another. And it felt like they were mostly going for comedy until maybe the last 2 or 3 minutes, where they instead went for some kind of epic closure to all these characters. But just running through the list of awkwardness, the scene of them trying to decide who's going to be the next king. And when that guy, who I, to be honest, barely know who that guy is, but he stands up and starts to give a very awkward speech, and he's got this little smirk on his face where clearly he's going to say, I should be king. And then Sansa says, Sit down, uncle. What? Sit down. Oh, okay. And then he turns and bangs his sword on the wall. Just a very clunky scene. And then Sam stands up and starts to basically pitch democracy. And my jaw dropped, thinking, are they really going to end on the note of no more kings and queens, let's turn to democracy? This whole series has been about the dangers of authoritarianism, putting one person in charge. I agree with that message, but that sort of felt like a bizarre ending. And then it turns out that was also a joke. Sam, sit down. That's ridiculous. We're not going to do that. So more awkwardness. And then you go to, a few scenes later, the first meeting where they've decided that Bran is king. One of the first meetings, led by the new hand, or the reinstated hand, Tyrion. Very awkward scene where he's fixing all the chairs. They're not speaking in unison, and they tell Bran, it'll get better next time. So all these really awkward comedic scenes, and none of it really working all that well. But let's talk about Bran as the king. On the surface, to me, it actually kind of felt like it made sense, because he's no longer even human. So he's no longer going to have the selfish urges that have led all these other kings down a bad path. It's almost like you take a supercomputer that has all the knowledge of human history, and he can take whatever situation they're dealing with, put it through his algorithm, and make the best possible decision. It kind of makes sense. The only problem is I don't think we've seen Bran make any decisions, really, since he turned into the three-eyed raven. All he's done is tell people that everything that's happened to you had to happen to get you to where you are today. He even said that in this episode once or twice. We haven't really seen him sit down and show any sort of leadership or make any kind of recommendations over what should be done. He's been so totally passive. So in that sense, I'm not sure how logical it is to make him the king. But okay, Bran is king. And also Tyrion, when he's making the pitch that Bran should be king, that felt a little bit on the nose, where he's talking about the importance of story. That felt like the writers talking to us and saying how important and how impactful this whole series has been. That felt a little on the nose. And speaking of on the nose, I think everyone on the internet who was talking about this show, when they were speculating on the ending, we all joked, and then in the end, Sam's going to throw a book on the table called A Song of Ice and Fire, or A Game of Thrones. And they actually did it, and it was just as awkward and bizarre as all of us would have expected it to be if they actually did it. I don't think any of us actually thought they were going to do it, and then they did. And if we talk just about where all the characters ended up, I think a lot of it sort of made sense. Jon ending up north, reuniting with his friend. He finally pet Ghost. Part of me wonders if they inserted that scene after the negative fan reaction from the last episode, and they thought, we know people aren't going to love this ending. Jon's got to at least pet the dog before we wrap up, or we're going to have riots on our hand. That was nice to see. Sansa ended up in a place that made sense. Tyrion as the hand, given an opportunity to make up for all of his mistakes the last few years, all that kind of made sense. And what they chose to end on, people heading north into the woods, that sort of made sense to me. The concept of the whole series, they've been restricted. They haven't been able to go north because of the zombies, and now they get to go and they get to explore a bigger world. That note sort of made sense to end on for me, except that they never really focused on that theme all that much. In concept, we understand that they're restricted in where they can go, but I've never seen a character say, I wonder what's beyond the wall. I want to go beyond the wall. I want to head north and see what's out there. And that's particularly, so it worked a little bit going north. At least that concept sort of existed. But then you go to Arya. The idea that Arya's ending is she's going to head west to explore the unexplored part of the world. Honestly, I don't even know if I would have realized that the west side of the world hadn't been explored if I was purely a show watcher. If I just watched the show and didn't do any research outside that, I might hear Westeros and think, oh, that's what they call Earth. I didn't really realize how small an area of the planet they were occupying until I went on Wikipedia or I talked to my brother, a book reader, And then I found out only a few weeks ago, oh, that's interesting. There's this whole other side of the world that hasn't been explored. So that idea, I feel, was not really prevalent enough in the series for it to be such an important note in this finale. And then the fact that Arya is the one who would go exploring, I never got the feeling that she was this character who wants to see the world. She's been so focused on revenge and for seasons that's who she is for me. Maybe in the beginning, maybe it was 8 years ago, I don't remember it too well, she was the type of character who wanted to explore, wanted to see the world. But this felt like it was closure in a way that it felt like it was calling back to something which I don't remember or was never really there. So in concept, the idea of we're going to go explore the world and see what else is out there roughly sort of makes sense. But Arya being the one to lead that, to me, did not make a whole lot of sense. Anyway, those are my immediate thoughts. Overall, started the episode feeling, hey, maybe this is okay. If I ignore everything that's happened the last 2 or 3 episodes, take it on its own terms, this isn't too bad. And then it kind of went off the deep end for me and ended in a pretty disappointing way. But hey, maybe the prequel will be better. Maybe. We'll see. I've always wondered what Westeros looked like 5,000 years ago. So 2020. And also, maybe the new Star Wars will be great. So, whatever energy they didn't put into this season, hopefully they'll put that into Star Wars. So, anyway, I'm going to sit on this episode for a few days. Maybe I'll give it some more thought. And maybe my C rating, maybe it'll go up to a C+. Maybe there were things I didn't notice the first time around. Anyway, thanks for watching, everybody. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to hit the little bell icon so you can receive notifications and get more videos like this one.